big news on the block was that Matthias Tau would be replacing Kurt Walker for 4 races after Walker did this. And from what I know of King Arthur Thomas, I don't think he was too impressed with Walker's piece of driving. The car that you saw riding the wall, car number 3, Leon Kennison, was able to fly across the country to race an Arla event later in the evening, and but he was cleared to race that. But Matthias Taub, of course, the Swedish driver who made headlines by qualifying a family-owned car for the Cayella Grand Prix and running very well in it, will get another shot at Master Cup Series glory, and he will be running the TM Junior Series in 2010 in order to work himself up to a full-time ride in 2011. Aside from that, I will be replacing Kevin Colley in the number 44 car for the Australian round, which is round 13. Sort of a second home, you might say. And with that said, Dan, off to you. Thank you, Lance. The Clutch Pole Award goes to Tony Durbin in car number 33. This is a number that's very synonymous with the Talladega Superspeedway, as Steve Marshall won here in car number 33 many, many times. Great jump over Kevin Colley, who stood on the outside of the front row, Leonid Roderick, and Drew Eisenman. In the second row, and you see in the third row a purple car that is Cyrus Laterza. Great qualifying effort from the Mitchell & Sons team as Tony Durbin streaks away from the rest of the field, but a big lead at Talladega doesn't going to get you much. Roderick on the inside of Kevin Colley towards the end of the first lap, and here he comes to try to take Tony Durbin. Durbin moves to block, but Durbin then realizes he's left with 2 options: move out of the way or crash into Roderick, and he wisely moves up. A first lap crash would be a rather ignominious way to exit the race. Damian Snyder moves up to second, and Scott Bates, the third. Arto Kekkonen doesn't get a very good start. You see him in, well, last. Kekkonen dropping ground early on. Not what was expected of him. Arto is sitting very high in the points table coming into this race. Scott Bates early on takes the lead. There's Alexis Rainsford right there, but watch right behind him as Palmer Styles moves up to let Marcus Leonard in, and that creates a 4-wide situation. And when these cars are running 39-second lap times at about 245 miles an hour, that is not necessarily the wisest of moves. Styles hasn't really even been driving that well lately, and watch up there with Damian Snyder as he brushes the wall, has to lift way out of the throttle, and Leonard Roderick has no other option but to make a 4-wide situation just to avoid crashing into the back of Snyder. This is Jack Cronin. Yes, Jack Cronin. We haven't heard that name in the Master Cup Series in a couple of years. Cronin's brought his independent car here. It's a Gasnier Dragoon that he purchased from Andrew Craig Racing, a second-hand Andrew Craig car, and he's not running too bad with it. Ryan Araki in car number 32 is going to create a bit of 4-wide of his own when he in the whole outside lane just decides to try to pass Alexis Rainsford. Why, I don't know. Ryan Araki's ride is very much in doubt for next season, and with very reckless moves like that, it's not hard to see why. But you see 4-wide quickly becomes 5-wide, and Dale Roswell very wisely takes to the tarmac on the bottom. Probably the best move to avoid creating a massive crash before we're even 10 laps into the race. More 4-wide ensues, and you can tell that this race is not going to end too well for some people if they keep driving like that. Back up towards the front of the field, you can see Jack Cronin and Lewis Kingston duking it out for the lead of the race. Ryan Araki there has not been doing a terribly good job at being cautious. Here's Cronin and Kingston duking it out for the lead. Kingston led the lap, Cronin did not, but it is still much better than any would have expected of this 89 car coming into the race, who didn't even have a full pit crew at the beginning of this week. However, that certainly changed when the number 5 team from Andrew Craig Racing agreed to pit this car during the race. First caution flew in 8 laps from the start. This is a 79-lap race. Impatience, impatience, impatience. Todd Wodarczyk moves over into the side of Carlos Donzello, creating a 4-wide situation. Todd Wodarczyk is most likely going to get fired by that team after failing to qualify that car several times, and they've not been too happy about that. And here is Wodarczyk having a great 4-wide dice, except Carlos Donzello decides to shut the door, and that creates this. 4 cars into the wall, and it's amazing it didn't involve everyone else behind him. Kurt Pliskin in the 16 car is the only car to drop out from that incident. Here's another look. Both Wodarczyk and Donzello are both equally to blame for this one. Even if you're 4 wide, you shouldn't be pinching back up the racetrack. Apparently some people's spotters need replacing. David Krikorian in car number 9 led on the restart. This is a guy whose ride is not much in doubt. There hasn't been any rumors of replacing him, and he's beginning to show why. DK having a very good run so far here at Talladega. Very solid driver, doesn't normally tear his equipment up, and that's probably why Lennard want him back. A very good run so far for DK, but look at Gary Edwards, who is being considered for the lead driver role at the new Tremwell team with Camelot Racing next year. And just look at Edwards blast around David Krikorian, with Krikorian able to fight back just a little bit. Carlos Donzello and Brian Sendak, 2 cars involved in the first incident, are way off the pace, as it shows here. Justin Brooks in car number 12 assumed the lead. Here's another guy who's going to be most likely looking for a ride. Rachel Rainsford makes a move on the inside of Brooks to take over the spot. Kevin Colley is going to be looking for a ride somewhere. It's probably not going to be with Flash Racing after he's failed to qualify this 44 car several times. And it's going to be a bit of a shame because Colley was dumped by his Arla team for questionable reasons, and he's sort of been bouncing around several different cars this season. We hope to see him back in the Master Cup Series in something, but keep in mind there's always that Independence Trophy to go for, and he might be interested in going for that. Second caution flew on lap 24. Much bigger incident towards the back of the field. That is Damian Snyder and Alan Hodges, a little 4 wide as Snyder pinches up into Hodges and creates a big mess. Lots of cars spinning around. Cronin, Johans, Kingston, Krikorian, McGlynn, Noraki, Chris Allen, Milano Rossini, Tony Durbin, to name a few. There's the big mess starting. There you can see Roth is around. Joseph Howard gets through there. Scott Bates goes for a bit of a ride. Adrian Devereaux is in there. Drew Eisenman got a big hit in that 31 car. But Eisenman's able to drive it away, but that will be the end of his day, as it will be the end of Scott Bates' day, because it looks like that car is done for the day. Here's Roth going around. There's Watts getting through. Cronin is in it. There's Rachel Rainsford. Milano Rossini got a big hit. George Dennis did as well. George Dennis in the 21 car. That one more angle. There's Roth going around, and a big plume of smoke leaves no other option for following drivers and really nowhere to see other than, well, straight into the wreck. Laterza gets a piece of that. Anyone involved in that incident is going to have to hope that they're able to make it to halfway so that their crews can repair the cars in the 1 hour allotted to them. Stuart Sandoval restarted as the race leader with Gary Edwards in second. That's Johnny Ada on the inside in the 0-4. Ada's not really been driving too well, but when he has made a race, he's generally not done that bad. And he's beginning to demonstrate that as Johnny Ada makes a move for the lead on Stuart Sandoval. But here comes Marcus Leonard to rain on the parade. Marcus Leonard makes a dive on the bottom, sweeps into the lead. Here's Palmer Styles behind him. You can see there's much less of a pack now. So many cars involved in that big mess. As Styles takes the lead away from Marcus Leonard, Danny Savin in the 91 having a very good run, and Juliana Silva in car number 1 hanging in there as well. Roderick takes command of the field, leads a couple of laps with the 91 car right behind him. There's Justin Brooks in the 12 having a strong run. Milano Rossini is going to be the first car to be put a lap down. And for those of you not familiar with the new rules for the super speedways that New York decided to not go by, you have to stay on the lead lap if you're going to continue the race by halfway. The car leading at halfway, well, Johnny Ada in the 04. So Ada would start from pole for the second half of the race. Most of the cars got repaired. These are the cars that were cut after the first race. No surprises there. Most of those cars were either a lap down or out. In fact, all of them were. Marcus Leonard here in the 02 car having a great start to this race. He's had a good first half, and he's just got to continue that. Johnny Ada, pretty good run off the line. Leonard Roderick right behind him. Leonard sweeping in. There's Nasova as well. Justin Brooks is still in the running, and we're on board with him right now. We're right in the middle of the hornet's nest. Every single car looks to be in mint condition, or somewhat mint condition. And how about Adrian Devereaux right there, as we see a Volpe train at the front with Nasova and the rock star, Danny Savin. Savin having a fantastic run this year so far. He's been driving very well despite the fact that he's not in a very powerful race car. Oftentimes, just seemed to be hindered by that car more than helped by it. And he's been blowing his teammate Milano Rossini out of the weeds for the entire season. Here is Danny Savin trying to make a move around Julian Asova, but it's going to take Tony Durbin in the 33 car to get around both of them because it didn't look like Savin had the car to get by Asova. Tony Durbin, however, was quickly able to. But look on the bottom. It's two of the three Hodges-Walter cars with Alan Hodges and Mike Whitmore, with George Dennis right behind him for National Racing. Here comes Hodges wants the lead, but Mike Whitmore is going to want a piece of that as well. Whitmore not being a good team player for the second race in a row. He dives on the bottom to hang out his team owner out to dry. Of course, that's what Alan Hodges said he paid Mike Whitmore to do. Bad luck strikes Brian Sendak again as his engine grenades on him right after he crosses the finish line, not 10 laps into the second half of the event, and he runs into his teammate Todd Wodarczyk, almost creating a massive wreck there. Of course, Sendak not terribly happy with Wodarczyk, so I don't think he'll split any tears over that. Caution 3 was on lap 46. Alexis Rainsford in car number 27 is going to make a bit of a dive here. Makes a move on the inside of Woody Watts. Watts lets her in for some reason, but the end result is Rainsford hooking the back of Watts' car and sending both cars spinning through the infield and back up into traffic. Big hit in the driver's side of Alexis Rainsford's car as Todd Wodarczyk piles into the side of Woody Watts' car. Rainsford would be okay, but that was a very, very nasty hit. Another look at it. Watts moves up the track. Looks like this is the same camera angle twice in a row. Now one more look at it. Does look as if Watts moved up, but Rainsford probably shouldn't have been sticking her nose down there. And the rest of the field just sort of piles into the side of Woody Watts' car. Yeah, here's Todd Wodarczyk. Oh, nasty hit into the side of Watts' door. No report on Watts if he's on injuries or not, but I would think he would be okay. At least I hope so. Justin Brooks in the 12 gets a piece of that. So does Adrian Devereaux in the 96. Both those cars able to continue. Johnny Ada restarted at the pointy end of the field with Damian Snyder right there with him. Lewis Kingston in the 84 having a strong run. Problems with Stuart Sandoval's car. On the restart, he dove the car all the way to the apron and way out of harm's way. To not be a very good start to the second half for Stuart Sandoval, who may also be looking for a ride at the end of the year. Lewis Kingston having a very strong run so far in that 84 car, but two of the National Racing cars come to ruin his fun at the pointy end of the field. We're on board with Chris Allen, probably one of the most anonymous drivers in the field, who may also be out of a ride at the end of the season in car number 7. Behind Julian Asova, Kingston is off to his right. There's Stephanie McGlynn in the 52. But at the front, it is Leonid Roderick and Marcus Leonard. Leonard's been looking for some big results lately, but look in front of them, it's lap traffic. Carlos Donzello and Alexis Rainsford. Donzello is going to do his best to be courteous, but that's not exactly an easy thing to do here at Talladega. Ironically enough, this split race was supposed to prevent these lap cars from getting into the way, and we're beginning to see how well that's working. Not. And as you see the rest of the field moving their way around Donzello as quickly as possible and around Alexis Rainsford, but in the end it was still Roderick way out in the lead. But being this is Talladega, the rest of the field was able to catch up to him, just not very quickly. Julian Asova, Marcus Leonard, and Leonid Roderick were able to reel him in, along with Johnny Aiden. Right behind them is Danny Savin, Mike Whitmore, and Kevin Colley. Leonard makes a great move around Roderick. And here comes Danny Savin in the 91 to spoil some fun. Roderick was able to shuffle back into the lead, but Johnny Ada was trying to make something go, and that wasn't really working. And on the bottom, you see Kevin Colley working with Mike Whitmore in the 73. 4 wide for the lead! Oh my. And Whitmore takes over the top spot temporarily. Then Kevin Colley sweeps into the lead, and then there goes Rachel Rainsford sailing by him, along with George Dennis. And the 8 car, Gary Edwards. 4th caution, lap 71, just 8 laps remaining in the event. And a big one ensues. George Dennis goes way up into the fence. Fortunately, there's no grandstands over there. Gary Edwards rides the wall. Ryan Naraki, Julian Asova. We're going to have to see what the cause of this one was. It looks like contact between David Krikorian and Lewis Kingston. Big crash. Gary Edwards on the wall. We hope everyone's all right here. Don't think there will be much in the way of injuries. There's Jack Cronin in the 89 car, who apparently got a piece of that. You saw his brakes apparently locked up going into the wall. Big hit from Dennis into the fence. See Rachel Rainsford in there, Kevin Colley in the 44, Johnny Ada in the 04, and then Jack Cronin just thinks he's through there, but David Krikorian's rear end is sticking out in the middle of the track. That'll be the end of Krikorian's race and the race of Julia Nasova. Great race for both of them. Tony Durbin led the field to the restart. Arto Kekkonen tried to make something go on the outside, but that's not really working. As Stoidler abandons the Finn to work with Tony Durbin, Mike Whitmore making a pretty aggressive move. But then, with less than 10 laps to go, you had the Hodges-Walter cars all trying to go for the win here. And ironically enough, 1 week ago, they all wrecked each other. But here they are trying now to win the race, and they're still not showing that they're working together very well as Mike Whitmore gets left out by Alan Hodges. And Tony Durbin is able to gap the field by a little bit in the closing stages of the race. But here they are, 2 laps to go on the back straightaway. Alan Hodges makes a dive on the bottom, and Hodges is going to make it stick with Ross Peterson and Marcus Leonard right behind him. Hodges makes a move, and he's got the place now. He just got 1 more lap to hold off Ross Peterson, who may be hanging up his helmet temporarily at the end of this season. Hodges throws the block. He's trying to block both lanes at once as we got into the white flag lap. Hodges trying to go outside to the bottom. He's holding the middle. He's trying to hold both lanes up. Down the back straightaway, it appears to be paying off. He's somehow been able to block 2 lanes at once. Hodges doesn't look like anyone's got anything for him as they come down through the tri-oval. And down, here they come towards the finish line, towards turn 1, as Alan Hodges, the Welshman, takes victory here at Talladega. His first time in 3 years that he's been in victory lane, and he celebrated very, very appropriately. Fantastic win from Alan Hodges, who is actually leading the standings coming into this race. Tony Durbin finishes 2nd, Ross Peterson in 3rd, Scott Stoidler in 4th, Marcus Leonard, great run for the young Canadian, in 5th, Mike Whitmore in 6th, Cyrus Laterza in 7th, Stephanie McGlynn in 8th, Arto Kekkonen in 9th, and the rock star Danny Savan trying to rejuvenate his career in 10th. Alan Hodges and Tony Durbin came into this race 1-2 in the standings, and they obviously stay there. Leonid Roderick 3rd, Arto Kekkonen 4th. In contention for the Drivers' Championship, could we have a rookie champion in Kekkonen? Alexis Rainsford in 5th, older sister Rachel in 6th, Chris Johans in 7th, then Gary Edwards. Damian Snyder and Dale Roswell sits 10th in the standings, 94 points out of the lead. And here is 11 through 20. Lewis Kingston is 100 points out of the lead in 11th. Stephanie McGlynn in 12th. Scott Stoidler 13th. Mike Whitmore 14th. Gotta wonder how they're feeling sitting the 13th and 14th in the standings and their team owners leading the championship. Kurt Pliskin's been falling down the standings ever since he won in Indianapolis. He's 15th. Ross Peterson and Stuart Sandoval, the 2 Chapman cars, 16th and 17th. Danny Savan in 18th. Scott Bates sits 19th. And then Zach Duff rounds out the top 20 in the points. That's all for this week in the TM Master Cup Series. I'll see you next time.